Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We've got a couple of community programs to share information about, some cases of community interest, and then have an update on criminal justice statistics given the FBI's recent report on mid-year UCR data from last year to share with you too. First thing though, with St. Patrick's Day coming up, we want to highlight our partnership with iHeartMedia and Lyft in order to encourage people to use transportation options and not drive while impaired to the slightest degree within Maricopa County. And this Sunday, March 17th, is St. Patrick's Day, and this is the latest iteration of our Save Lives, Don't DUI campaign. The campaign itself offers discounted rides from now through March 17th to ensure that party goers and those who feel Irish that day have a safe incentive to not drink and drive. First-time Lyft users, after you've downloaded the app, should use the code BeLucky, and you can then get $5 off of your first 4 rides. And if you already have the app and you're a current Lyft user, you can use the promo code BeLucky19 and get 20% off of 2 rides. Now, we really want to encourage people to download the app and or the codes now and schedule rides in advance, both to and from the event that you're going to. And with these discounts, you can cover the majority of Maricopa County. We saw an amazing amount of participation in the campaign last year when almost 14,000 people took advantage of the codes. And we compared that to St. Patrick's Day in 2017 when we were just starting this off, where 1,500 people used the codes. So from 17 to 18, we went from 1,500 to 14,000, and that's just tremendous. That increases safety on the roads for other people. It ensures safety for those who are using rideshare options and taking advantage of this Lyft opportunity. With the discounts, we can ensure that people get home safely after getting safely to an event. And for what might wind up being a $5 or a $10 travel cost, that goes a long way when compared to the $5,000 to $10,000 you can spend on a first-time DUI. And under Arizona law, even a first-time DUI, you can spend time in jail. So, be lucky or be incarcerated. The option here is a pretty straightforward and a simple one. So again, we want to thank the partnership with iHeartMedia and Lyft, and the option for people to use, first-time users, the code BeLucky, current users, the code BeLucky19 to get discounts on rides. Okay, next, mid-year UCR data. The FBI has reported the semi-annual data comparing the first half of this year, or the first half of 2018 to the first half of the year before. Remember, with UCR data, we're going to lag anywhere from 9 months to as much as a year behind because of the amount of time it takes for agencies to report. Beginning in 2021, the National Incident-Based Reporting System will go into effect, which might provide more up-to-date data. But for us in Maricopa County, we're trying through the implementation of our community-based prosecution model, get more real-time data for trend analysis on crime trends in our area. Comparing the first 6 months of 2017 and 2018, nationally overall crime has declined. There are some categories of crime where the decline is a little bit less and maybe a small uptick in other areas. And we're seeing in Maricopa County the same general trends. Now for the first half comparison, it's not a cumulative total of all reporting agencies in Arizona. So generally speaking, the best data you're going to see is a relative comparison from 2017 and 2018 for cities and populations of 100,000 or more. So the majority of those are going to be in Maricopa County, but it's not going to cover everything. And we're seeing the same general trends too. Overall, all property crime categories showed a decrease, including burglaries declining almost 13%, vehicle thefts declining more than 3%. This is nationally. And we generally perform a little bit better here in Arizona than those national trends. And then for nearly all offenses and violent crime, reports declined, except reports of rape increased a small amount. And it's a mixed bag as well in that particular category within Maricopa County. Now, that's something that we've seen for the last couple of years. There are 2 contributing factors to why we may be seeing more reports of sexual assault or rape. Part of that is a change in the definition that now accounts for sexual assaults against males, as well as a wider variety of how sexual assault is committed. Secondly, we cannot discount a change in the environment of encouraging people to report sexual assault and the response of the criminal justice system to take those reports seriously and to follow through on them and to do an ever-increasing better job at investigating those types of cases. One other factor for us here in Arizona, too, is ever since we had the Sex Assault Kit Backlog Reduction Task Force, say that 3 times fast, ever since we had that task force, we've seen more sex assault kits processed. We're working our way through that backlog. We have seen indictments. So we have a different environment, too, today than just 5 years ago, in which we encourage victims to report sexual assaults. And again, we're getting better at the investigation, the collection and processing of the sex assault kits, and then also because of that enhanced awareness and encouragement of victims to report, we get better victim participation and assistance in prosecuting those cases too. In particular now, this gives us an opportunity to take a look at general trends here in Arizona. This particular chart reflects felony commitments for both adults and juveniles, though I will tell you juvenile commitments in the Department of Juvenile Corrections are extremely low. They may be at a historic low right now. So this represents overwhelmingly felony DOC commitments. This chart in particular, the blue line shows statewide commitments, and this is from the Administrative Office of the Courts, Superior Court Statistics. You can find this by going to, or just Googling an Administrative Office of the Courts, and then under Publications and Reports in the drop-down, go to Statistics, and you will find information both on limited jurisdiction courts and superior courts. This reflects superior courts. The orange bars there are felony DOC commitments from Maricopa County in particular. And I highlight this because there's a misimpression, I'll characterize it that way, that more people are going to prison from Maricopa County year over year than ever before. And it simply isn't the case. And this is not my office reporting this data. This is coming from the commitment orders that are issued by a superior court. You can't be transferred from a county jail to a state Department of Corrections facility without a commitment order from a superior court judge. So that gives you an additional level of objectivity in looking at the data if you need it. The gray line at the top is the percentage of DOC commitments from Maricopa County. Now, I just want to highlight that the axis on the right as you're looking at it, that 50% mark reads straight over from the 50% mark. The line above it is not the 50% mark. That's related to the left axis of 12,000, or the number of commitments to DOC. So with that explanation, what you see here is that overall we now have fewer DOC commitments statewide, fewer DOC commitments from Maricopa County, and actually fewer DOC commitments from Maricopa County as a percentage of overall commitments to the state prison. At the same time, and these charts are available for you as well from Amanda afterwards, as well as, now, the axis on the right is really sensitive, so that gray line looks like a tremendous increase. It's actually just a couple of percentage points. But this shows an increase in the state's population and the relative increase in Maricopa County's population going from estimates provided by the Office of Economic Opportunity from 2011 through 2017. So I show you this to indicate that Maricopa County is now more than 60% of the state's population. And the state's population has grown over this time frame. So when you compare that to DOC commitments, what you then see is while Maricopa County's population is now a greater percentage of the state population, we're sending fewer people to prison when compared to the rest of the state too. So we're utilizing prison less than we have before. Arizona is committing people to prison less than it has within the last 3 years, and Maricopa County has continued to grow over time, which means that the incarceration rate for Maricopa County has declined significantly over the last few years, and at the same time we've seen crime rates fall. So that's a good comparison of commitment numbers and population to criminal justice system outcomes. with the FBI UCR report coming out as it did, this is a good time to review where we've been with respect to those numbers. Okay. A couple of other programs to share with you from a public safety perspective. Our prosecutors have been partnering with city prosecutors to stop repetitive shoplifters. This is called our STOP program and focuses on prosecutions for violations of Title 13, Section 1805, which is our shoplifting statute. Shoplifting is usually treated as a misdemeanor offense that is handled at the municipal level. But for some, the threat of misdemeanor prosecution is not enough of a deterrence to keep them from engaging in repetitive incidents of shoplifting. So the partnership between this office and municipal agencies identifies repetitive shoplifters who've already been offered all sorts of opportunities at rehabilitation through city-level services and programs, and that has not deterred them or kept them from committing these crimes. And we all pay as a consequence. Retail outlets do not simply absorb those losses. Retail outlets will adjust prices accordingly to cover those losses. State law allows for those who commit 2 or more shoplifting crimes in a 5-year span to be charged with a felony instead of a misdemeanor. Now, the first 5 defendants identified in this partnership had a combined total of 105 arrests and 73 misdemeanor convictions. So obviously the criminal justice system's response to them and their response to those sanctions was not working. This partnership has now led to 12 defendants being charged with felony shoplifting since this partnership began 6 months ago. And we're continuing to work with municipal agencies to ensure that only those who are demonstrating a refusal to adapt their behavior to reasonable expectations in the community and to quit stealing from businesses are a focus of this effort. And here's just one example. 44-year-old Brady Johnson had been contacted by police officers more than 120 times just in the last few years and still continued to shoplift. He'd been arrested and prosecuted many times at the city level and each time offered services and programs in lieu of jail. After going through all the second chance options with the city and still continuing to break the law, Johnson eventually was sentenced to jail and had a Class 1 misdemeanor conviction on his record. Unfortunately, he refused to stop his criminal activity, and again, mentioning that over 120 contacts with law enforcement over the years, was charged with a felony and convicted. And that just reflects, too, the extent to which prosecutors, police, and even the business community are working together now trying to address some of these initially characterized as low-level offenses in order to keep people from continuing to commit crime. Now, with respect to cases of community interest, in State v. Brandon Tucker, the defendant was sentenced on March 8th to 6.5 years in the Department of Corrections after pleading guilty to 4 counts of burglary and 1 count of possession of a dangerous drug. Between December 25th of 2017 and February 4th of 2018, the defendant committed multiple burglaries around the South Phoenix area. His first burglary targeted a former employer where he was captured on surveillance video inside a hotel using a laundry cart to conceal a number of items, including computer equipment that he took from an office. The defendant was then linked to 3 additional vehicle burglaries where he was able to enter secure lots and get into several first responder and city vehicles taking multiple items. A fingerprint found on one of those vehicles was linked to the defendant and the other crimes. This defendant showed no regard for the law or those he impacted with his criminal actions, and the sentencing was a fitting resolution. Now, I highlight this one because each one of those particular offenses could be designated a nonviolent, low-level property offense, but the scope of the impact to the community was such that a prison resolution was appropriate. And yet, depending upon how you characterize and slice and dice the current prison population, this is the type of offender that some proposals for changing our sentencing statutes would miss and treat them as a nonviolent offender. And when I say miss the totality of the impact that they've had on the community. Next, State v. Noel Ray Santos, first name spelled Noel, second name Rey, last Santos. Was sentenced on March 8th to 33 years in the Department of Corrections after being found guilty of 5 counts of aggravated assault. March 22nd of 2018, officers went to serve a warrant at a home where the defendant was. 5 officers were near the front door when the defendant fired through the front door, injuring one of the officers and narrowly missing the others. The defendant was a prohibited possessor due to prior felony convictions and was still on probation at the time of the shooting. And that also illustrates the degree to which some offenders maintain a violent disposition that puts others, including law enforcement, at significant risk. Speaking of law enforcement and shootings, I want to update you that for officer-involved shooting call-outs between January 1st and March 15th in 2017, we had 6. Last year, which saw a market increase overall, we had 21 at this point, and so far this year we are at 11. And while any one could be too many, we're seeing last year, at least thus far, really was an anomaly in terms of the numbers that we saw. I'll give you an update on the Uber Tempe crash case dated from March 18, 2018, and then I'll take your questions. We have received the case back from the Yavapai County Attorney's Office, and I thank them for doing the initial review, which allowed us to avoid even the appearance of a conflict given this office's previous relationship with Uber in a rideshare promotion campaign. The Yavapai County Attorney's Office determined that there was not a reasonable likelihood of a conviction or insufficient evidence related to enterprise liability for Uber within the collision. We're continuing to review the case with respect to potential criminal charges involving the driver, and we're asking the Tempe Police Department to conduct further investigation into the video itself. One of the critical decision points for us will be to match up specific actions of the driver at specific points in the roadway in order for us to be able to properly assess a reasonable likelihood of a conviction with the evidence that we'll have. So that's the latest on that. What questions do you have?
In regards to the Tempe self-driving accident, any possible charges?
That's currently under review. When we initially received the case from the Tempe Police Department, there were requested charges for us to review. We then sent that to the Yavapai County Attorney's Office to do the initial review of that, as I mentioned. So the rest of that case has been sent back to us. We're continuing to work with the Tempe Police Department to further the investigation and conduct additional forensic review of evidence. So those decisions are still open.
Any charges against driver Jerry Sandstead?
That case we're also continuing to investigate with the law enforcement agency involved. I don't have anything to report at this point.
And the last one for us is anything on the Glendale police officer, Johnny Wheatcroft?
We've turned that matter over to the FBI for additional investigation, so that's now in their hands, and I don't have anything additional to be able to add to what's already been said.
That's all for us.
Okay.
With the full bar complaint filed against Juan Martinez, has your office taken any further action in regards to Juan?
2 points to be made on that. First, previous complaints against Juan, who was 1 employee out of 1,000, 1 prosecutor out of about 350, were dismissed by the presiding disciplinary judge. And I've seen a copy of the presiding disciplinary judge's findings in that too. So with respect to matters that we have not been privy to, that's up to the state bar disciplinary process. And I'm going to let that process take its course out of respect for how attorneys are held accountable in Arizona. With respect to information that is included in the state bar charges for our own internal investigation, we've already imposed discipline. That consisted of reprimand, counseling, and a training requirement. And also, based upon how this office utilizes our compensation program, that disciplinary process that we imposed also resulted in a loss of upwards of several thousands of dollars and not being able to participate in that. So that's what we've done already with the information that we had. With respect to what the bar disciplinary process is, that needs to go forward. I'm going to respect that process and also the due process rights of everyone involved. There are a number of individuals who are going to be referred to in that process who are current employees of this office, And I hope you can understand that out of respect for their privacy and wanting to encourage employees in this office to report misconduct, I don't want to say anything more about that.
When you said training, does that mean training for the office or training for him,
It was training for the employee.
for the employee?
Yes.
Some of the female staffers said they didn't feel comfortable coming forward because he's in a position of power. Do they have any reason to not feel comfortable coming forward, or have you made any changes where to encourage people to come forward if there is harassment?
Well, yeah, I mean, specifically, over the course of the last several years, there have been changes to office policies underscoring the fact that, in general, attorneys are a self-regulating profession. In order for us to ensure that ethics rules are followed, we have to hold one another accountable. And in my conversations with folks who were affected by the conduct, I communicated to them personally to let them know that I need them as prosecutors and as fellow attorneys to be able to assist me as an attorney in making sure that we hold everybody equally responsible. I was able to communicate to them personally as well that I found that conduct unacceptable and that there is absolutely no reason why they shouldn't have felt comfortable coming forward. Now, given the scenarios involved, they weren't employees per se of the office. They were working as interns and had what I was able to communicate to them was a misperception about how the leadership team in this office takes those types of accusations. And as a result of the subsequent investigation, we're able to demonstrate just how serious we did take it and how no one in this office, including me, is above being held accountable for violations of our professional rules of responsibility or the policies and expectations of this office and how we treat one another as fellow human beings.
He has some of the biggest cases in the county, the Saucedo case, the Redondo case. Any concern that what's going on with the bar is distracting him from his duties?
I haven't seen anything to suggest that that's an impact or an effect. And the other thing I have to keep in mind too is, again, some of these allegations that are within the bar charges, we, management in this office, have seen part of previous filings by individuals and organizations against the employee, and they've been dismissed or they were found to not be credible. And so I've got to be very mindful that I can't take adverse disciplinary action just because someone files a bar complaint. We have our own internal review process. That process has also resulted in the past in referring some of our own prosecutors to the state bar for a review of whether or not ethical rules were violated. And so that's the totality of the circumstances here. Obviously, a bar complaint is something serious. We take it serious. We review it internally. But there's also due process requirements that have to be followed for everybody. And just because you're a prosecutor doesn't mean you're not entitled to due process protections, just as if you're a criminal defendant or a victim of a crime, you're entitled to due process protections too. And I think in order for us to maintain our system of justice, we have to observe that in all circumstances, regardless of who the individual may be.
Does it have any red flags that it's not the first time? I'd imagine, in the past, something's been mentioned?
Well, just because people keep filing complaints against a prosecutor doesn't necessarily mean those complaints are well-founded. And again, we've got findings from a presiding disciplinary judge that a previous iteration of some of these charges were not. To the extent that new charges are found to have merit and discipline is imposed, then I know as an employer what I need to do. And I won't hesitate to do so.
So another seat is going to open up on the state Supreme Court, being passed over just a couple weeks ago. Will you put your hat in for this other position?
That particular process, so I'm going to give you a long answer. That particular process is independent of the duties and responsibilities of this office. And what I hope you and others can appreciate is that I have never leveraged this office for a different opportunity or for a different purpose. And I won't start now by doing that. What I will say is that Mr. Bales is there until July 31st, and there won't be any movement on that particular process for several more months. So I've got time to think about it.
Also about state Supreme Court issues, obviously the Jones case goes to oral arguments. tomorrow and looking at the most recent briefs on a case, I mean, where do you think that this case should go?
Remind me of the Jones case.
It's the marijuana case
Oh.
out of Yavapai County.
Yeah, this off, much to maybe the surprise of some, the consternation of others, and the need to clarify for everybody else, this office has not been involved in that litigation at all. Maricopa County is a large county. We have a lot of cases, but not every single case comes out of here. We'll have to see. I haven't been following it. In this county, we previously had litigation to address the question of some definitional sections of the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act. And after that was done, as I told the other participants in the case, we weren't going to appeal that. That's how we resolve things within the United States and within Arizona, where there are questions about statutory definitions. We ask courts to rule on that. I don't come up with my own definition and then apply it. So we've kind of settled some of those issues for us in Maricopa County. We'll have to see what the state Supreme Court does with the specific facts out of Yavapai.
Are you gearing up for the potential that you would have to, arrest people for having resin versus dried leafy flower pot?
Well, we don't make arrests. I don't have the power to arrest. In terms of any guidance that we would provide to law enforcement afterwards, that guidance would come from whatever the state Supreme Court says in their opinion. We're not chomping at the bit to go after people who may have a legitimate medicinal use of marijuana that comports with Arizona's Medical Marijuana Act. Inasmuch as I refer to my statutory and constitutional duties and responsibilities, I don't have any more authority than what the legislature provides me when it comes to the criminal justice part of the office and prosecution. So if the state Supreme Court identifies an area where we would have the authority to prosecute where we haven't before, that's not going to change what law enforcement does unless they see a crime being committed and can make an arrest. And only after that would the case be submitted to us. Now let me restate my answer another way too, because this gives me a chance to underscore that any prosecution office in this state doesn't get to pick what types of crimes people commit. It's up to individuals making choices about their behavior that comes to the attention of law enforcement that results in an arrest, that results in cases being submitted to us for review. So I told you it was going to be a long answer. So it's a long-winded way of saying how the Supreme Court makes their decision and the guidance that they provide to law enforcement is just one step before we ever see anything.
In regards to the Tempe case, the officer involved shooting, what's the latest on that?
We have it in the office now. It was submitted by the Tempe Police Department. It's under review. Given the number of shootings we saw last year, there are a lot of cases for us to work through and review. So I don't have a timeline to be able to share with you or to give you an expected decision date. Because there are a number of those cases that we've got to review, some of which may result in further investigation or other questions too. So what I can do for you right now is confirm that the Tempe Police Department did submit it for review, and it's now part of all the other ones that we've got to take a look at.
So you're saying it's not at the top of the list,
No.
it's just like any other one?
Well, depending upon the agency and the circumstances involved and the people involved, every single one of those cases is number one for them. And for us, in order to be able to be consistent in the process we use for review, so that people can be confident that every case we looked at, we treated just as serious as every other one, we've got to follow our same process for that one too.
Is there a timeline?
No. No.
Do you know how many cases roughly OIS cases are currently under review?
I think we've got about 30 right now. And again, that reflects the large number that we had last year and some that are still pending from the end of the year before, where it just takes a while for it to catch up.
Do you have
Sorry.
anything on Hacienda? Any updates?
I don't have anything for you at this point in time.
The nursing?
No, I think we've had the announcement of the arrest and the charges that were initially filed, so that case is going through its active prosecution.
California this week said it would end the death penalty. Obviously, this office has a number
Well, I would say right now at the end of fiscal year 2018, I think from the Maricopa County Superior Court annual report, we had 49 pending cases, down from 71 in fiscal year 2014, which even then was about 50% of the height from about 5 years before, where there were maybe 140 and 150. So from a historical average, we're at an all-time low right now, and that reflects this office's concerted effort in three particular areas. One, focusing on our review of cases and making sure that we have the evidence to establish someone's guilt, to establish aggravating factors, to establish that that mitigation does not outweigh those aggravating factors. And the fourth phase is comparing that case to others where juries establish a reasonable likelihood that they will impose the death penalty. Second area then is our ongoing commitment to reviewing cases whenever additional information is provided by the defense. And whether we're in the first year of a case or the third year or the fourth, if additional information is provided that causes us to reassess our determination in any one of those other four phases, we'll do it. And there have been several cases where, well after the fact, we've decided to withdraw the notice of intent to seek the death penalty. And then the third area, and this is one where I think I would say that this is the biggest contributing factor to the number of pending capital cases being at an all-time low, is our partnership with the defense bar on capital cases and working with them to hold off filing the notice of intent in order to receive mitigation information so that we can make the best decision early on. One of the things that gets lost in the mischaracterization of this office is somehow having a zeal to pursue the death penalty, is that under the Arizona Rules of Criminal Procedure, we have to file that notice of intent to seek the death penalty within 60 days of someone being arraigned on a felony murder or a first-degree premeditated murder charge. If we don't file it by then, we can't file it afterwards. So where we haven't been able to get the information up front to decide not to, then in order to protect the victim's right to justice and due process, we'll file the notice. But as I mentioned to you, and I think we're demonstrating with the reduction of the numbers, we're working with the defense to look at information, and we're only proceeding on cases where we're able to say, as I mentioned in those four phases, that there's a reasonable likelihood, even in a capital case, of having the necessary findings. California's going to do what California's going to do. I don't live there anymore. I live here in Arizona. And we would be very wise as a state to be cautious about following any example from California. That doesn't factor at all into the decisions that I have to make at the county level. I would also underscore, too, that for what we're responsible for doing as county attorneys is to take a look at the crimes that are committed within our jurisdiction and to try to determine as best we can what the appropriate resolution is. And if under Arizona law the appropriate resolution for a horrific murder is the death penalty, then that's what I'm charged by my oath of office to pursue. The actual imposition of that penalty then becomes a state-level responsibility. And I can't affect that. That's a decision for others to make. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all very much.